First of all, I just want to say a huge thank you to be able to speak here today. It's a real privilege, and I'd like to thank the sponsors for that as well. To echo a comment earlier, where it's the best meeting of the year, as the 7th of January and my first week at work, I fully agree with that. I want to share basically all the information I share today is public information. It's not necessarily an opinion of McCain. It's my opinion to a certain point. I don't know whether that adds or lessens the value of that information. What I want to do to start with, though, is just talk about some of the previous presentations, actually, because I always sort of reflect when I sit at any of these sort of sessions and think about the way I'm feeling and acting, and sort of like reflect on how those presentations really resonate. And I think a lot of what Stephen shared, and I really do love Stephen's presentation every single time. It's when I think about my own spending habits, when I think about my own sort of saving habits, how many times I'm eating out and things like that, I think it's a real sort of this sentiment that we keep thinking back to. Sometimes I sort of judge the amount of Amazon deliveries that I'm still getting delivered to the house from the wife and kids. I don't think they've got quite the memo yet, but I certainly feel like I'm tightening my belt, and I don't really understand the reason for that. But some of the volatility that we're seeing. One of the phrases he used, and I've reflected while I was just sort of sitting there, was it's not a supply problem, it's a demand problem. And I think he's right with that, and he's talking a lot about different commodities there, and I really then reflected to potato, and I'll talk about it a little bit more in my presentation. But it's also the level of demand we were expecting in potato, and I think that's something we've got to consider as well. So I think we were probably more optimistic than where we were, and I'll touch on that later. Also capacity. Where the capacity is, where is it going to get produced? I think that is a real vital element to why we're probably feeling a little bit more negative coming into this Potato Expo. And it is about who is going to be making the fries. So although we are seeing we are still seeing positive growth within the industry, maybe not to the level we wanted. Who makes the fries is going to be even more important. Cedric's view on Europe, always fascinating, and again, you'll see a lot of the same data points that I'm going to sort of share, and I'll put my perspective on there, and then it's great. I feel like I'm going to bring the mood down after Kim's positivity there. Kim was so positive, and I think the role of Potato USA in the industry to promote potato, promote production, the ability to operate is going to be vital in this next, I'm going to say 18 months to probably 3 years as we go forward. We've really got to come together as an industry, and again, I'll touch on that. And then finally, the GLP-1s and 3s. That's probably the first time I've had real insight into that. It's something that's very new. We're still gathering the data, and even within our business, we're trying to understand what some of those impacts are. So to see that information laid out in that way, I found it quite fascinating. And yeah, it's like minimal change on one slide, and then we're still trying to understand it. It looks like it's over-indexing a little bit on frozen impact. So it was really interesting to see that. So I thank Potatoes USA for pulling that data and sharing that, and that's what this meeting is really all about. So as we basically look, and again, this has been covered plenty of times, we are living in this volatile world. I think Cedric's slide of, all the volatility that we've faced previously, it's going to continue. And, I've put on there the global conflicts, the wars that are going on, and quite honestly, sadly normalized. We live in this world now, and it's almost like we're accepting of some of the conflicts that are still going on. We see a huge economic uncertainty when some of these global conflicts happen, and that causes shockwaves globally. Inflation is still real. The 27.1% consumer price index. We see the consumer confidence piece, echoing over and over again. that downturn that, again, Stephen talked about on agriculture commodities, and we're at the base, it feels like, but we haven't got that upward trajectory yet, and that's going to be a concern. And then I will just sort of touch a little bit more on the tariffs and consumer confidence. So again, I've just reflected on how I'm feeling, and we're all I'm in a very privileged position, but we're all probably feeling different elements on that consumer confidence, but it is overall at an all-time low across the US. And what it's actually meant, I think, more than anything else, when I reflect on the last sort of year, 18 months, and as our business has tried to navigate some of the complexities of tariffs, and we have production both sides of the border, is it's just paralyzed us. We've not been able to make decisions. We've not been able to move the business forward at the same amount of pace. We didn't know what to do, the right thing to do for customers. And all of these things have just sort of slowed us down. And what was, I'm going to say a year, 18 months ago, I was feeling very positive, and we were seeing growth, probably not to the level we were thinking. That very quickly changed. And I think all of that sort of like investment being stalled, I think that has been a drag. And what I will say early on is I don't see that being a quick bounce back. And I think it's going to take time for that to get in there. And then finally, climate risk. I think we have had 2 very good crops across North America. Yeah, there's been pockets of issues, but overall, I would say volume's been good, quality has been good. And I think that's very important as we look forward at some of the threats that we're going to be facing. Is quality is going to be basically table stakes. But let's be real, climate risk is still going to be a concern. I think disease pressure, we are seeing that in a number of regions where certain diseases are starting to really raise to the surface more and more. And then there's that ongoing concern. Anybody's ski season's being ruined at the moment, but as we think forward, I think the irrigation water availability, everything else like that, water is still going to be a top priority going forward, and we've got to face that ongoing. So we've got to keep working towards that. Now I've got to work out the ticket clicker. There we go. It's not working. Can you move me forward one? There we go. So I'm going to go back 2 years. So I actually spoke at this conference 2 years ago. And what I looked at then was basically the supply and demand picture for the processing industry, including a capacity outlook. So call this my 2-year-on report card. We anticipated that demand was going to be between 2 and 4%, where we were. We were seeing that actually some people were expecting that demand to be up to 6%. And in that actual period, we saw actually a decline more recently in North America, while emerging markets continue to grow. As we sit here today, I think a more realistic number will be somewhere around about the 2% mark. So again, it's good that we're in growth globally. We also expected to see capacity to come online, and again, we were seeing 3 to 4% on capacity to come online, production capacity. And I think that was what was interesting. Even when I think back to 2 years ago, I was definitely concerned that there was like a real tight balance that was going to be operated there. What we actually saw was that capacity came online an awful lot quicker. So we actually saw 6% capacity come online over the last 2 years, and there's still more capacity coming online or in the pipeline. And even the capacity that has come online in North America and Europe, it's probably still not ramped up to the full amount. So it's going to be an interesting play as that goes through. All of this is resulting in shifts in dynamic globally, increasing pressure on where potatoes are produced. The demand, as we've talked about, is at 2%, but it's here in North America where we're sort of suffering from that lack of confidence, where it's impacting us more. As we look at the picture, we do need to break it down into basically the two markets. The first one being export, and the second one being domestic. So it's certainly not the Rabo trade map that they showed, but this is just solely for potato. And the first stat I want to share with you is 50% of private label in retail is imported into the US from Europe. 50%. That's a huge number. And what we see is from all over, but basically on the west coast of North America, we are seeing flat to some decline in export routes into Japan, KC markets. Local capacity in China and India, it's been spoken about a number of times, is not only starting to support domestic volume in those regions, but also exporting into markets where we're already producing too, such as Japan and the Middle East. Those emerging markets, Japan and India, they are accelerating development there. They are more competitive, they're more cost competitive, they're improving their quality, and there's further gains that they are going to make. We cannot underestimate the threat that they pose on the industry. Europe's traditional trading routes, and it sort of shows on the map of colour, you know, all of that volume going out west is in decline. And the Europeans, they've built the capacity, they've got the potatoes. We've seen that through Cedric's report. And essentially, you know, they are going to be looking at new markets. And again, the green lines show where the growth is. And the growth, they are looking at North America. They also are looking at South America as opportunities, you know, for growth. And we've seen from a cost, and it was a small little bullet point in the bottom right-hand corner of Cedric's slide. You know, the Europeans are indicating between 10 and 20% reduction on their contract prices this year. So we talked about their low free buy price, but all of a sudden they're taking a huge reduction in their contracted values for the next year's crop as well. Greater alliances outside of North America are being made, and it's about self-reliance, it's about food security, and we're seeing this being a higher priority in countries like China. And maintaining our high standards, remaining competitive, will be solely table stakes as we work in this new world. As we look at domestic, the domestic market, overall, the overall trend has been foot traffic has been down, check prices has been up. The graph that it's basically showing is some very recent data that we've been starting to look at. And again, I'm going to say there is some light at the end of the tunnel. Major QSR burger chains are still seeing flat to declining volumes in North America, but with some chicken chains outperforming traditional menu items. Consumers are really seeking value for money. And where basically the customers are getting this, or the QSR chains get this right, it is really driving volume. We're seeing promotional activity starting to overperform over the festive period, which again is I'm going to say a green shoot that we should hang on to. Value meals, again, are starting to resonate with consumers more and driving volume, but it's at the sacrifice of dollars and of check price through the till. But what we are seeing is that uptick on volume. Yes, we're losing some value, but it's how do we get the balance between those two to make sure we are all successful in the industry. So as we summarize the outlook, I think domestic, and Kim touched on it, I think we've got increasing population, so I think this 2% growth on domestic capacity, domestic demand is probably going to be more realistic going forward, but we have got more capacity coming online. We possibly will see more older capacity being removed or being mothballed as we go forward, and we're going to get this increasing pressure from imports from Europe as they look to backfill historic trading routes. We need to remain competitive and show value to our consumers. The export market, we've got to basically adapt to these new trading routes that are being forged. We must remain relevant and competitive. Overall, protecting our markets and the conversations we have across the whole supply chain to promote quality, consistency, continuity of product, the safety of our product here in North America will be critical to the success as we go forward. As I mentioned at the very start, it's going to be a long road ahead, but we also know an awful lot can change very quickly. So that's where I'm almost a little bit optimistic, and we have to keep adapting to this new environment. And that's finally the end comment, really, is the partnership. We in this room have the power to sort of create our own destiny. So I think whether we're a machinery manufacturer, whether we're a researcher, seed processing grower, we've got a huge range of stakeholders here together, and it's how do we drive continuous improvement? We have a real threat facing our industry, and again, it's not just going to be a quick bounce back like we saw during COVID. But I also believe we have a huge opportunity. I never want to be a victim. I always think we can take our destiny into our own hands. And I think about seed and variety as a great opportunity that we can come together as an industry. I think about how we can drive potato production efficiencies, supply chain efficiencies. And this isn't all sat on the grower. It's sat on everybody in this room. I think we've got to play a part in increasing our market share, engaging with customers, leaning forward to listen to their voice, to see what they want and how we can best serve them. And this opportunity is here in the next 3 days. We all have the next 2 or 3 days to spend to have those difficult conversations. And they're not easy conversations. I've had to have tough conversations with growers over the last 6 to 18 months, but I'm not going to shy away from them. We'll carry on having the conversation. How do we make the whole supply chain more resilient, more profitable for the long term so we can get back to growth? So thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing you on the McCain stand over the next 2 days. Thank you.